Hi everyone, this is Carol Keller, independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from Antioch, Illinois in the United States, coming to you today with several alternatives to the March 2021 Paper Pumpkin Kit, which is called Here's to You. I have created 3 alternatives and I'm really excited to show them to you, so I will turn my camera around so that we can get started. And this month's kit, like I said, is called Here's to You, and here's what you get inside. One thing it does tell you is that there is an extra surprise in this month's set, which is a set of stencils and a sponge, and it talks about how to use those. It also coordinates with the Mountain Air stamp set, which we will be using for one of the alternative projects, and as well as the Majestic mountain dies. Here are pictures of what the cards look like, and then of course on the back there's always, it shows what the kit includes. It always includes a Stampin' Spot, in this case Calypso Coral, and a stamp set, which has some flowers, trees, birds, and then some sentiments. Always card bases. So there are some printed card bases and some craft envelopes to go with them. Some printed envelope liners. This is my favorite, but there are 2 in there, 2 different ones. And then a printed card front, printed die cuts, some white die cut labels, some linen thread, some adhesive dots, and some dimensionals, mini dimensionals. And then, like I said, in the kit there are also 4 free stencils. I'll lay them out this way so that you can see them. A little sunburst and the clouds that I showed, stars, and some that can be used for mountains, and we're going to use those today too, as well as a sponge. I highly recommend cutting that sponge down into 4 because then you get more sides to use for your project. So let me get this out of the way and I will show you first of all what the actual samples that come in the kit look like. Here is one, so with the envelope liner in there. Isn't that pretty? So I use that one as congratulations, and then there's another for birthday, and again the liner coordinating with the card front. So those are the 2 cards that you can make in the kit. There are 4 of each, but as I said, I came up with some alternatives. I've got 3 of them to show you today. Here is the first one, along with, of course, a coordinating envelope. So for this one, again, I used the Mountain Air stamp set, and I'm actually going to change it up just a tiny bit from what's here, but for the most part, what you see is what you will get. And the first thing that I did was I wanted to use this as part of my card front. So I sliced off where it starts to curve, and I use that for the back of the envelope. So we're just going to slice that off with my paper trimmer. And then I took the piece that was left, 4 1/4 inches, and I cut it in half, so 2 1/8, so that you can make 2 cards. And that is what we're going to use for the bottom. And then one card obviously will have the flap that goes on the envelope. So I've got just a basic white card front that I have scored already in the middle, and I'm using my bone folder to burnish it a little bit so it lies flat. And we're going to adhere the pattern paper using my multi-purpose liquid glue, so I can make sure I can place it right where I would like it at the bottom of the project, and make sure your flowers are going the right way, of course. Oh, that's right, and I forgot it's a smidge long, but we don't have to worry about that. We're just going to cut it down with scissors, or you can use your trimmer if you do it beforehand. Let me just trim that off. And now for the next part, this is where we're going to change it up just a little bit. So I have a scrap of Seaside spray and another one of Pretty Peacock, and we're going to do some stamping. So I have the Mountain Range from the Mountain Air set. And when it's large like this, the easiest thing to do is take your ink pad to the stamp rather than the other way around. And we will stamp the Mountain Range on the Seaside spray cardstock, so tone on tone. And next we're taking the stamp with the trees. The easiest thing to do is to lay the stamp down and then pick it up on your block. And the same thing, we're going to take Pretty Peacock, and again bringing the ink pad to the stamp and making sure we get good coverage. Sometimes there are little lines from the edge of the ink pad, so you want to be a little bit aware of that. And we will stamp this one. And then we will use the dies to cut them out. And for this one, it simply just lays right over where your stamped image. But for this one, what's going to happen is we are going to lay it over the tops of the trees so that you can cut the bottom part as long as you would like, although I'm pretty much going to cut it right here. So I will run these through my Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine and be right back to show you. All right, so we have our mountains cut out, and then I'm going to show you what to do for the trees. You can see that this little piece is ready to be taken off. But again, we're going to slice it here, and I'm going to show you how to do that so that it is right for the size of your card. So I'm bringing my trimmer back in. And I'm just going to cut it toward the bottom. Like that. Save this for another project. And then I want to measure 5.5 inches, since that is the size of my card front. So if you are in metric, do the same thing, but obviously matching it to the size of yours. I think what I'm going to do, let me check the measurement here. I think I may cut just a smidge off this end first, just because there's a little bit too much unstamped space, I think. And now we'll flip it this way, whoops, and at 5.5. And now we have enough to fit across the card front. So our next step is just to layer those. And actually, before we do it, because it will be easier, we're going to do our stamping. So I am going to take my Calypso Coral ink pad to stamp the happy birthday, because again, that's one of the coordinating colors. And for these small stamps, the easiest thing to do to make sure that it's straight is to lay it down and then pick it up with your block. Ink it very carefully. And then we're just going to stamp it in the upper corner, the upper left corner. And we're going to do the same thing with the birds that are in the set. Only this time we're going to stamp them in Pretty Peacock. And we're just going to stamp them right next to the sentiment. And actually, while we have the stamps out, we're going to stamp our sentiment on the inside as well. Back to the Calypso Coral. Make sure it's inked and right side up. And it says, all the best for a happy, healthy, and prosperous year. And that is all of our stamping. But we do have some more die cutting to do, but first we'll finish assembling. So you want to make sure that your sentiment is going to show. So you kind of place where you think they're going to go. Oh yeah, that'll work out beautifully. And as you can see, I did not stamp my sample, but then I decided to stamp this one, and I do think it looks much better, much, much better. So the Pretty Peacock piece is resting right against the pattern paper, and we are going to adhere that along the bottom with Stampin' Seal. And the reason I'm doing it along the bottom is that I want to be able to fit that mountain range behind it. And again, just butt it up against the pattern paper. And for this, we can do the same thing. Use some Stampin' Seal across the back. You could also use multi-purpose liquid glue. And we're just going to slide it in. And I'm doing it just until it covers the white space right here. Oh, that's so pretty. And our next step is ribbon. So I'm using the scalloped linen ribbon in Pretty Peacock. And I don't want the seam to show, so I'm starting it from underneath. And that butterfly is very strategically placed. So I'm going to go bring it over to about the same spot and trim it so there's just a little bit of overlap. And then we'll put a glue dot on each end to hold it down. That way nobody sees where the seam is, because like I said, we'll place that butterfly right over it. So I'm going to move this here so I can see about where it needs to be for correct placement. So I think we'll do this one and just pull it kind of tight. And last but not least, we have our butterflies, and I've already die cut them. They come from the Brilliant Wings dies, which are absolutely gorgeous. This larger one cuts out 6 dies at once, 6 butterflies at once, and then we have detailed butterflies in every size that is cut out by the outline, plus some other fun ones and some smaller butterflies, which is the ones we are using today. So I have cut them out, and the reason you see 4 is this little guy is going to go right on the inside. And I'm just going to use a little glue dot from the kit for that, or maybe a couple of them, to put on the inside. And we'll just put it down here in the corner. So the inside is now complete. And for the ones on the outside, I took my bone folder and just ran it this way along the sides to give the butterfly some little dimension. I did it with all 3 of them, and so they all have some dimension when we put them on. So I'm going to take some multi-purpose liquid glue for the first one and just put a little bit on the center, because I want those wings to fly freely. And we just need to hold it down just for a second until that glue kind of grabs the surface. And then for the other ones, I'm going to use some more glue dots, again along the center. And again, we're going to place that blue Seaside spray butterfly right over the seam to hide it. And then the other one over here, pressing that center down where the glue dots are. And then of course, a project is not complete without bling. So I'm going to use some basic pearl jewels, putting them on with my Take Your Pick tool. There are 3 sizes of pearls. So I put the smallest one on the smallest butterfly, the medium-sized one on the medium-sized butterfly, and the largest one on the large butterfly. Whoops. All right, and there he is on the, and there is the pearl on the last butterfly. And our card is complete. That is alternative number 1. And here is the second card of the 3 that I've created. This one also uses our postage stamp punch to create the panels. And I've also layered each of the panels with a piece of cardstock, and again in the coordinating colors. So I have those already pre-cut. 2 of Pretty Peacock, 1 of Seaside Spray, 1 of Calypso Coral, and 1 of Bumblebee. So we will use those to mat what we punch out. And 2 of the punches come from the envelope liners. So I purposely use the flap end so that I can still use the bottom part to make cards similar to the one that I made already. And so again, you want the flowers going up and down the long way. And then for the bricks, I actually want them going sideways, so keep that in mind as you're punching. But the same thing, I started with the flap end and punched so that they go horizontally, because that's what we need for the card. So next I have a scrap of Seaside Spray. We're going to stamp the happy birthday in 3 different colors. And the easiest way I found to do it was to start with the one in the middle. But first we're going to punch it out. That way we can center our greeting, our happy birthday. The easiest way to do it is to start with the middle color, which is Calypso Coral, and center everything around it. So I've got my happy birthday stamp. With these little stamps, you want to really be careful not to get it too inked. And then make sure, of course, to clean in between. Next, we will do the Pretty Peacock on the bottom. I don't know about you, but I am definitely going to miss the in colors when they are retired, which is coming up very soon, unfortunately, next month. But I love Pretty Peacock, I love Seaside Spray, and I especially love Rococo Rose, and sadly they will all be retiring. So my recommendation is, if you like them, order them while you can, because pretty soon they'll be gone. And last but not least, Bumblebee, which is an in color that will be continuing because it just came in our new 2020-2021 catalog, so it will be staying until 2022. And here we go with the last one. It's a little bit off center, but that is the difficulty with not being able to put my head over it to make sure it's straight. That's okay. We will do that. For the next part, I need another scrap of Seaside Spray, but this one I'm not going to punch out just yet. I'm going to take one of the stencils from the kit, and I'm using the one with the clouds, and I'm going to take some Whisper White ink and a sponge. And you can see I've already cut mine into 4ths for this project, because that is the way I use them. And for this one, I positioned one of the bigger ones, one of the bigger clouds toward the bottom. So I'm going to use that first, since it will also then be out of my way. But I'm just dipping my sponge into that Whisper White ink. To make those beautiful clouds. You actually can also use embossing paste or shimmery white embossing paste, but I decided just to use Whisper White ink this time. And I'm going to use the smaller ones like this. And I'm not exactly sure what's going to punch out, but it doesn't matter too much. I just want the idea of clouds. And there we have our clouds. And before we punch them out, because Whisper White is craft ink and not a water-based ink, it will take a little bit to dry. So in order to speed the process, I'm going to use my heat tool to dry it. And you will see that the color maybe is not quite as vibrant as it was before, but the good part is it will not get onto your project, the rest of your project, and it won't smear. So now I'm going to grab my punch again and punch out my clouds. And before I adhere them, I'm also going to stamp the bird. So I lied, one little tiny bit of stamping left. Grab my Pretty pretty Peacock ink pad again. And we'll stamp the little birds. Whoops, we want to make sure it's right side up though. Right about in the center, or close to the center. And then the last part we have to stamp, I did already punch out the basic white scrap with the postage stamp punch. And I'm going to take the beautiful flower grouping that is in the set from the kit. And I'm stamping it in Smoky Slate. And I'm actually going to stamp off first because I want to be able to color the flowers different colors. So I'm going to stamp off. I want it to be really light. So that you can hardly see it, and then we're going to color it in. And actually, while I have the ink pad out, we're going to stamp the envelope. Again, stamping off first. And the same thing for the inside of the card. So let's grab the card base. Again, using basic white. And stamping off first. And we will also do the inside sentiment. So we'll grab that Calypso Coral ink pad and use the same sentiment that we did on the card before. And now, although our stamping is done, we will be doing some coloring. So to color it in, you can use chalks, you can use your Stampin' blends, but I chose to use my Stampin' Write markers. And we'll work on the outside. One to show you. I will speed up the process so that you can see which colors I used, but I will not take the time to color everything on camera. So I started with Seaside Spray. I basically copied the colors for the most part that I saw in the DSP, or the Designer Series paper. And it's nice because it is light enough that you can reasonably see them. And it doesn't matter if you can't, because if it's hard for you to see, it's hard for everybody to see, right? But I'm basically just following the outline that's stamped in Smoky Slate. And I'm going to do the same thing with the rest of the ferns and Seaside Spray. And I decided to do 3 of the flowers in Bumblebee. And for the Seaside Spray, I used the fine point. For this one, I'm going to use the fine point for the smaller flowers, at least to outline them a little bit. And they're small enough that you can color them in with that fine tip as well. Next is Calypso Coral, which I used for the smaller flowers and to give definition to the larger ones, just like again in the picture, sort of mimicking that. And then following it up with the broader tip to fill in, and with the fine tip to give some more definition. And then last but not least, Pretty Peacock for the stems. And now all we have to do is put them together. And my layer is 1.5 inches by 2 1/8, or 5.4 by 3.9 centimeters. And then the last thing I'm going to do before I adhere them to the card is to wrap some of that beautiful linen thread around this section. Just wrapped it around several times, moving it and crisscrossing it this way and that. and then making a knot. I would like to work off the roll so that there's no waste. And then I'm just moving it to where I would like it, and it's a little loose, so I'm going to tighten it up on the back by adhering some glue dots to keep the thread in place. So with 3 glue dots on the back, that will hold the thread right where I would like it. And now we will start our placement on the card. And I'm just going to lay them down where I think they need to be before I actually put the rest of my adhesive on the back. Trying to keep an equal space among all the pieces. And actually, I think I've changed my mind. I'm going to pop this up with dimensionals to give it a little bit more interest. So you can use your minis that came in the kit or some regular size Stampin' dimensionals. And you want to make sure you have good coverage even in the center so that it doesn't become saggy. Oh yeah, that looks better. And there it is. There is our card. All I have to do is finish coloring the inside, but this is what it looks like completed. I used the same colors that I did for the outside one. And again, the same thing on the envelope. I hope you like it. So there is our second card for today. All right, and last but not least, our last card is created with some of the stencils that come in the kit so I can show you how to use them. The first thing I want to do is show you how to make the stencil that goes with that envelope. I simply used the cutout. I simply used what remained after I took the die cut out, using that as a stencil, putting it in the corner. And on this one I used Pretty Peacock because I was just practicing, but we're using Just Jade in the project today, so I'm going to use Just Jade. And just take your sponge, ink it up, and basically use it in the negative of the stencil, adding as much color as you'd like until you get the shade that you're looking for. And it is a little bit fragile, but it still works to create that little stand of trees on your card front or on your envelope front. And there we go. Very simple. And now our envelope is done, so I will move those out of the way. And I'm going to close this for now because we're going to start off making this panel so that I can put that mountain stencil and the cloud stencil through their paces. So all right, for the next part we need a scrap of basic white that's 4 inches or 10.2 centimeters wide, and this is a lot longer than we're going to need because we're just making this little panel, but this is the scrap that I had. And we're going to use that mountain stencil. And what I noticed is that the same outline is here as down here. So this part is for stenciling the mountains, but this part then is good for stenciling the sky. So that's what I did. Just put it toward the top of my project, and you can see it's the same width as the stencil. The cardstock is the same width as the stencil. And I wanted to change up the colors. So in addition to Just Jade, we're using Balmy Blue for the sky. Again, I'm bringing my sponge back in. And I'm just going to hold it down. You could also use washi tape, but I found that it was easy enough just with holding it down with my hand. There we go. Get some color on our sky, and you want to make sure you get to the edges and the corners. Basically laying down as much color as you would like. Definitely personal preference. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. And we're going to use that again in a second for the card front. For now, we'll close it up. And next I'm bringing in Smoky Slate, because you will see that there are actually two kind of layers of mountain. So we're going to use this one, move it up here, and place it right along the edge of where we finished our inking for the sky. Again, holding it in place, taking another edge, and using the Smoky Slate this time. And it doesn't matter, you're going to run underneath it, but that's not going to matter. As you can see, as you will see, we're going to cover it with another shade of gray. We're going to use Gray Granite for the next layer, and it's darker, so it will cover that. Okay, and it's that quick. Smoky Slate is done for now, but we will be using it again on the card front. One thing you do have to be careful of, as you can see, my fingers are inky, and I just had to rinse off some Just Jade from the card front. So it is definitely best, if you can, to work from lighter colors to darker colors for that very reason. All right, and now we're going to take the other stencil that has mountains. I just realized I used this on the other side from what I did here, but that's okay. Still works, absolutely. And I just moved it down a little bit. Actually, I think I'll move it down a little more this time. Oh, I know why I didn't, because of that little white space right there. That's what I did. I moved it down just a smidge because I knew I needed to cover that white space with Gray Granite. But I think I'm going to add a little bit right away, and then actually I will try to move it down. I'm going to grab a different sponge in the hope that I can keep the green off myself. I'm going to lay this again so I can see where that space is. So it's right toward the edge, right about here. So I'm just going to make sure that I fill that in with some Gray Granite for that next layer to cover up that white. So now I can move this down a little bit without a big white space there. So I think I will do that. And we can always fill in also, but I think I'll move it all the way down so we don't take out the sky. So this piece actually will then be longer than that one. And now that I've got my Gray Granite, I'm going to do my best to fill it in so that that line, that white line, disappears. So it may take a little bit of work to cover it up. All right, that looks pretty good. And actually, I'm going to fill in some of that space with Smoky Slate. And as you can see, just with a little work, we're covering it up. And again, this is with Smoky Slate. And now we've got a little more interesting of a mountain, I would say. And see how messy it is? I'm going to go wash my hands again before we do the next step. And I have a new sponge so that I can eliminate some of the inkiness, but that's why my website is Carol's Inky Fingers. Happens all the time, occupational hazard. Okay, and now let me bring that stencil back in one more time, because there is yet another section that we're going to use, which is this, which is actually snow. So it makes little snow-capped mountains. So for that I'm using Whisper White again, and we're just going to lay this part of the stencil along the top ridge of that first kind of mountain range that we put in there, like this. And I'm going to grab my Whisper White, and actually I'm going to use, I had one sponge dedicated for that, so we'll use that again. And the same thing, again, we're going to lay it across the top of the mountains and really kind of dig deep in there to get that white to show on top of the gray. so that it looks like our mountains are snow-capped. That the area is really small, so you really have to dig in there to get the color. All right, and it worked. So now we've got some snow-capped mountains, but again, because this is craft ink, I'm going to use my heat tool to set it. And then I'm going to bring in my trimmer. And we're going to cut it down to size, so all the little smudges, nobody will ever know that they were there. And you do want to make sure you get all of the white edge off. And there we have our mountain range. And so again, it's a little bit wider, but actually I like that. I like the fact that it's wider. And next we're going to bring in the card front. Again, just using basic white. And now we're going to use the cloud stencil. And what I noticed on this one is there's sort of a reverse one that again can be used for the sky. So what's underneath it will be clouds, will stay white, but what's above it, we're going to use Balmy blue. And this time I'm going to move it so that it goes to the top of the card because I want blue all the way to the top. I'm going to take in my clean sponge and do the same thing. And we will be having to kind of feather out the color to the edge, and that's okay too. Really where I want the solid line or the defined line is around those clouds, cloud tops. And then I'm going to take this out of the way and then continue all along the top and the other edge so that it looks like one continuous line and nobody knows the difference. Now I'm going to decide where I want this piece to go because I want the clouds to be just kind of right above it, because I'm going to feather down then the blue down to about where it ends on that piece. And you can go in a little bit so it'll look like that, and then the same thing on the other side. Moving it over so that the white won't show because we are going to pop up with dimensionals this piece. And now we're done with the blue and with the stencils. And next we need our Smoky slate again. Take a fresh edge. And the Smoky slate just is that narrow band. So I'm going to make a narrow band here and Smoky slate on each side. And it just kind of finishes There we go. And we can, it doesn't matter if we overlap with the blue because it's just all going to blend one into the other like that. So I'd say that looks pretty good. And then for the rest, we're going to do some gray granite. And the same thing. We're just going down so that those mountains are going to flow right from one color into the other. And feel free to move your sponge. All right, and at this point, I know that this piece is going to fit right here. I'm going to do a little bit more up here. Make sure there's no white spaces showing. Oh yeah, that looks good. And now we're going to work on our trees on the bottom. For this part, I took one of the die cuts that comes in the kit, But I wanted to use, as I said, different colors on this project, so I didn't want to use the pretty Peacock, much as I love it. I decided to use just Jade, so I simply flipped it over, inked it. Okay, and the next thing I did was take the tree stamp, and I stamped it in just Jade. Kind of determining, whoops, there's not enough ink on there, determining where I was going to place this, but I am going to cut those trees apart. So and then doing another set. And the same thing, sort of positioning it here. So I want those a little bit lower. Oh, that's right. And before we do that, then the next step, of course, is to finish inking. I think I had a little bit of water there on my fingers. The sponge is just a little bit wet. And so again, I'm going with the Just Jade and kind of blending it in a little bit with the gray granite. I don't want big white lines, and just filling out the rest of the card that way. And then while I have the Just Jade ink, I'm going to take the trees again and stamp the inside. And the envelope. And then one more thing to stamp, and that's the sentiment on the inside, which we'll do in Just Jade. Same one as for the other cards. So the inside is done, and now we put it together. So we'll get that ink. Oh no, and one more thing to stamp, that's right. Just Jade also for the tag. And I haven't decided which way I want to use it. So I'm actually going to prepare two, and then we'll figure it out. But make sure that's clean. It is. For this, actually, I did not use the ink pad. I'm using my Just Jade marker because Happy and Birthday have to be inked separately. So the easiest way to do this is actually to ink the word birthday, because it's easier to see that one when you're stamping Happy. I think I got a little bit on there. And we're going to stamp that. And then clean it, of course. Never forget to clean in between. And then the word Happy. And position that on top, and like I said, it's easier to see because you can see the word birthday. And then we're going to take our tag, and the tag actually comes from the Hydrangea dies, and I have die cut one actually. I have die cut one this way, so I'm going to do it the other way and cut that out. And then we can decide which way to put it. So I'm going to grab these and snip off the two trees on the left and in the middle. And then we're going to use our dimensionals, our mini dimensionals, to pop it up. And I actually cut one in half to use on the end. Even though they're small, they were still a little bit big. But we want that end held down. And then I'm going to position it here so that we can still see our trees that we stamped. And then we're going to put dimensionals on the backs of the other two and put them in between to fill in. I'm going to use the other half of that little dimensional on this tree. And a few more on this one. And then position them in between the trees that you stamped. And this one on the end. And all we have to do is wrap our twine. And this was kind of an afterthought, so I'm going to wrap it a few times on this one, similarly to the way we did on the previous card. Just want to tie a little knot because this is more of a masculine card, so we don't want a bow. We would like a knot. There we go. Oh, that's right. We do not want to do that yet. We want to put on our tag. How could I forget? So I think my idea initially was to move it over this way. So I think we want the tag then going this way. So let's give that a try. So all I did was slide it on to the one end. Now we tie our knot. Okay, and trim the ends a little bit. Not too much waste. And just kind of spread them out. There we go, that looks better. And figure out where it needs to be on the card. I'm going to move it over a little bit to the right. Oh yeah. And I'm going to put dimensionals on the back of everything, including the little dangling tag, because we want it to stay stationary so that we can be sure the person who receives it can read it. And now we just position it on the card front, including the little tag. And there's our completed card. Card number 3. So thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed all the paper pumpkin alternatives. Remember that if you still need some of the in-color cardstock or ink pads or refills, now is the time to order because they will be retiring soon. I hope you enjoy my alternatives, my paper pumpkin alternatives every month. Please come back to my YouTube channel. You will see a paper pumpkin playlist. Please like and subscribe to my channel, and remember, if you click on the little bell, then you will be notified when I post a video, and as I do every month for paper pumpkin, but also many other Stampin' Up! Products, so I hope you can join me for those as well. Thanks so much, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.